Hey everyone, welcome back to For the Tech of It. Today we'll be discussing free and open source alternatives to Microsoft Windows and Apple's macOS. Let's get going. So there are a few important questions you want to ask yourself. Do you want your computer usage monitored? In other words, are you okay with having the applications you use or usage patterns reported back to the mothership? Do you want to have updates forced on you when you least expect them? Now, especially if it disrupts your workflow. Now, it's happened to me on several occasions while using Windows 10. I've been in meetings where I was preparing to present to the management team, and when I went to boot up my laptop in the conference room, I ended up getting that blue screen notice that a Windows 10 update was being applied. And it's very disruptive to my workflow because sometimes it takes as much as 6 or 7 minutes for that update to apply. And people are busy. We've got to get from one meeting to the next, and it's hard enough to get on people's calendars when you need to. Do you want to further extend the life of an older computer? Now, you might have an older Intel-based Mac or an Intel-based or AMD-based PC that might not be able to run the latest version of macOS or Windows 10. So I used to have an old Mac Mini. It was a 2011 Mac Mini, and Apple no longer, its operating systems no longer support that older hardware, but you can certainly run Linux on it. And finally, something else you want to ask yourself, do I need to use any software that's specifically written for macOS, or Windows? And these free and alternative operating systems that I'm going to talk about today will run some Windows applications. And a few of them have some cross-platform software that runs on the Mac, Windows, and on the operating system called Linux. So we'll talk about that. So let's start by asking the question, what is Linux? So just like Windows, iOS, and macOS, Linux is one of the most popular operating systems on the planet. In fact, it's the most popular operating system on Mars because the latest Perseverance rover is running the Linux operating system. So what else does Linux power? If you are, let's say, an Android phone user or an Android tablet user, you might have a Samsung phone, an LG, or a Google Pixel phone, or what have you. Well, Linux powers those devices. That's the underlying operating system underneath those devices. An operating system is essentially software that manages all of the hardware resources that your computing device has. So it knows how to talk to your mouse, your trackpad, your keyboard, your monitor, other USB devices you may plug into it. It knows how to talk to your drives and the printers. If you have a printer, it knows how to talk to your network. So if you have a Wi-Fi network or a hardwired network, the operating system handles all of that behind the scenes. It also provides you with security and file management, among other things. So that's a little bit about what Linux is. Now, let's talk about some of the common computing tasks that we use our computers for. Arguably, I'd say the most common computing tasks center around browsing the web, sending and checking email, and using office software like your word processor. You may even create spreadsheets, create presentations, things like that. The good news is that Linux does all of these things every bit as well as macOS and Windows, and you have a wide variety of free and open source software to choose from to actually perform these tasks. We will take a look at some of that today. Now, what all can Linux do? There are plenty of videos that deep dive into the different Linux distributions, and there are hundreds of Linux distributions. However, for this particular episode, I'm not going to go too deeply into Linux. I'll just cover the surface of some of the capabilities that it has. And I'll provide links to a few videos from others who do take a deeper dive into different Linux distributions, as well as some that provide you with guidance on how to download Linux and install Linux and try it out on your computer. Now, the good news is that Linux can be set up to where you can first try it out to see if you like it without overwriting anything on your computer. It'll run completely from a USB drive. So we're just going to venture today into using Linux for everyday tasks. And there are plenty of videos, as I said, that goes into that. And I'll have the links for those in the show notes. Now, Linux is completely free to use, and it will run on many older as well as newer computers. I've installed Linux successfully on computers that were manufactured back in 2009. So that gives you an idea of how far back you can go with the hardware to get Linux running on it. And today we'll be using a version or a distribution of Linux called Linux Mint. All right, so today we're going to go in and take a look at what I think are some of the more important features of Linux, such as the overall look and feel, how to apply updates, and finding and installing software on Linux. So let's go and do a quick demo here. All right, this is the Linux Mint desktop. Now, if you remember Windows 7, you can see that Linux Mint's overall look and feel is similar to Windows 7. Now, granted, the overall theme is different. However, from a navigation standpoint, they are very much alike. So let's walk through really quickly the Linux Mint desktop, and I'll show you a few applications that are included with it, some of the ways to customize the look and feel, and then we'll get into helping you to understand how to apply an update, install software on Linux Mint, and then we'll take a look at the web browsing and email. So if we look at here at the desktop, we've got some pretty basic icons. One is computer icon, which is similar to the My Computer icon in Windows. There's your home folder. If we double click on that, it opens up the Linux Mint file manager. Pretty simple there. You can even customize the background on the Linux Mint desktop by simply right-clicking and choosing Change Desktop Background. You can pick from any number of really nice wallpapers that are included with Linux Mint. Plus, you can add your own by putting them in the Pictures folder. If we go back to the File Explorer, here's a Pictures folder. I don't have any here, but you can add your own pictures. And those pictures would appear here once you click on the Pictures folder. So it's as simple as clicking on a wallpaper, and it shows up almost instantly. This looks really nice. I think we'll stick with this one. All right, so down here at the bottom, you have what in Windows 7 world is called, in Windows 10 is called the taskbar. In the Linux world, it's called a panel, but they're pretty much functionally the same with a few differences here and there. You've got a clock, you've got volume control. This shows that we're connected to a network. This shows that there are updates available to Linux Mint, and I'll show you the update process here in a moment. This brings up your File Explorer, which we just looked at. This is the Linux Mint terminal, which is similar to the command prompt in Windows. And Linux Mint also ships with a default web browser called Mozilla Firefox, if you're not familiar with it. Let's go into Firefox. So as I said earlier, web browsing and checking email in Linux is every bit as easy and functional as it is in Windows or macOS. So this is the Linux Mint homepage. Actually, this is the Linux Mint, the current version's homepage. If we go back one, disable that. This is the actual Linux Mint homepage. and you can find linuxmint.com. So browsing the web is as simple as you would browse it on macOS or Windows. We can go to a website, let's say Yahoo, or we could go to Google, or pretty much any website, ZDNet, or let's say the New York Times. Web browsing is every bit as simple in Linux and functional in Linux as it is in Windows and Mac OS. You can check your email through your web browser, or you can use one of the included email programs. So this is the Linux Mint application menu that I just clicked on. And over to the left here are some favorites. So we've got Firefox web browser, and this is customizable. There's a software manager. There's system settings. Of course, the terminal's here. You can go to your lock screen. There's your file explorer. You can log out. You can shut down the computer. It has a shutdown, restart, cancel, and suspend. I'll cancel that. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, you have an email program called Thunderbird. Now, I don't have Thunderbird set up, but I'm going to launch it here just so you get an idea of what it looks like. Let me close that. So you can set up email, calendaring, your address book. You can do chat, link files, feeds, news groups, you name it. Thunderbird's a very powerful email client for Linux. So if we look here in the menu, you have different categories. As you see, I'm moving my mouse over the categories. The list of applications that appear changes on the right. So there's all applications, and you can scroll through this list, and you get a nice description here on the bottom right. There are accessories, graphics, of course, internet, a very powerful and capable Office program called LibreOffice. It's a free and open source Office program that has a spreadsheet, much like Microsoft Excel. In fact, you can read and write Excel spreadsheets with it. It has a database program called Base. So if you're familiar with the Microsoft Office Professional, Microsoft Access is the database program that ships with that. So this is equivalent to that. There's a drawing program. There's a presentation program similar to PowerPoint, a mathematical program for creating and editing scientific formulas and equations, and of course a word processing program, and a calendar. There's sound and video apps, some administrative tools, different system preferences, and of course if you want a shortcut to get to those folders that we saw earlier in the File Explorer, let's say you want to go directly to your music folder, you can click here and it'll navigate to the File Explorer and go into your music folder. And of course it keeps track of any recent files that you've opened, and you can clear that list. So let's take a look at the update process in Linux Mint. Now, unlike with Windows 10, which essentially forces updates upon you, and it usually does so at the most inopportune time, Linux will simply notify you that updates are available, and it leaves it up to you to decide when you want to apply those updates. So to do that in Linux Mint, you get this little notification icon here. It's called the Linux Mint Update Manager. And if we click on that, this is the first time I've actually opened up the Update Manager because this is a fresh install of Linux Mint. It tells you a little bit about what the Update Manager is. And it's a tool that provides your operating system with software and necessary security updates. So you can apply the updates to patch vulnerabilities and keep your computer safe. You can create system snapshots with it. And Linux Mint recommends you set up an automated system snapshot and apply all available updates. So this way your computer is always secure and you can go back in time and recover from any potential regression. So if we click OK here, what's going to happen is Linux Mint's going to go out and say, hey, there's a new version of the Update Manager available. Now this here is a feature that allows you to switch to a local mirror. Now what a local mirror is, there are a number of servers, computers around the world that have Linux Mint and updates for Linux Mint available. And you can choose based on your location which one of those mirrors or servers you want the Update Manager to connect to in order to download the files needed for updating. So we're not going to do that right now. I'll just say no. And I'm going to click Apply the Update. We'll enter the password. Now this password is the password that you set up when you install Linux Mint. So when you log into Linux Mint with your user account, it's the same password you use to authenticate here. So I'll type in the password, if I remember it correctly. And it begins downloading the package files. Now, depending on the speed of your internet connection, the amount of time that this takes may vary. So it shows you here a list of all the files that need to be updated on Linux Mint. Now, I won't bore you with going through all of that. I'll go ahead and do the update here. We'll click OK. We'll enter the password one more time because I really want to just walk you through the process. So what I'll do is I'll pause the video here. Once this is done, well, it says there's 40 seconds remaining, so let's see if that's true. Actually, no, this is the download. This isn't the install. So it's going to download the packages, then it'll begin installing them. I'll pause the video here and come back once this is done. Okay, so we're back. The install process took about 5 minutes, and then I had to reboot after. So let's move on. Next thing I want to show you in Linux Mint is the software manager. Now this is similar to the Mac's App Store and the Windows Store in Windows 10. Now here in Linux Mint, it's broken into different categories. You can also search for applications here in this search bar. And they also, and this list changes, they also list some fairly popular applications that you may be interested in. Installing software in Linux Mint is very, very easy. So let's go to graphics. And as you see here, when I clicked on the graphics icon, it brought up a list of different applications that fit within that particular category. You can filter that list down if you want applications specific to 3D modeling, for example. You click on 3D. Drawing programs, photography, publishing, scanning apps, and viewers. So if we go to, where was it? Drawing. I'm going to show you how to install, let's say in this case, GIMP, which stands for the GNU Image Manipulation Program. You click on its icon. Here's a description of it. You get some ratings, up to a 5-star rating. And it gives you a screenshot of what the application looks like, as well as some reviews that users give it. Installation is easy. Click the Install button. It'll ask you for your password. Again, this is the same password you used to log into Linux Mint. I'll enter the password and click Authenticate. And then the installation process will start. Now, once it's done, actually we'll go back while that's running. You can look for other types of applications, say Office programs. As I mentioned, LibreOffice is installed. There's Sublime Text. I mean, there's just so many different applications here that are just free of charge. Now, having said that, if you find a particular program or a group of programs that you like, I would encourage you to make a small donation to those authors, to those developers who created those programs. And you can typically do that, let's say we go to Audacity, by going to their website and make a donation that way. Because keep in mind that a lot of these software developers who build this free and open source software, they don't do this for a living. They do this really as something in addition to their 9-to-5 workday. So if we want to continue to see more free and open source software like this, I encourage you to donate some money to those software developers. Linux Mint, in fact, if we look at their homepage, because Linux Mint is also a free and open source operating system. We'll go to linuxmint.com. There's a donate link here. And they give you information on how much money they've raised so far. You can make donations through PayPal or debit or credit card or what have you. But now that we actually have GIMP installed, I'll close out of this. We'll go into graphics, and there it is, the GNU Image Manipulation Program. We'll click on that. It opens up GIMP. And here's what GIMP looks like. Choose a template. No, say legal. And then you can begin using this drawing program in Linux. Now, removing software in Linux Mint is just as easy. You can either go back to the software manager and uninstall it that way, or you can go here to graphics, right-click, choose uninstall, enter your password, click authenticate. It's just confirming that you want to remove it. Click OK. And it removes that package from your system. So now if we go back to graphics, the GIMP program is gone. So this great, there's been a lot of concern over the years at how complex Linux is. And yes, in its early days, Linux was a pretty complex operating system and environment to work in. But as you can see, what I've just shown you here today, that's no longer the case. We've pretty much did everything in a very point-and-click fashion. Now, under the hood, Linux is still every bit as powerful and configurable as it always has been. But if you don't want to have to deal with any of that, Linux Mint is an excellent Linux distribution to go with. Okay, so that's Linux Mint. That's web browsing. And next up, I want to talk to you a little bit about word processing and just general Office type applications and how you can use Linux to do that. As I stated earlier, Linux has a plethora of free and open source Office type software that you can choose from. And those products are every bit as capable as Microsoft Office, and most of them support the Microsoft Office file format. So you can open and create Office type of documents, spreadsheets, presentations with them. And most of them are absolutely free. So keep that in mind. Now, I've heard other folks say in recent years that if you need to get any real Office type work done, then you should avoid using Linux. So my response to that is simple. Those who say it are wrong. They don't know what they're talking about. Because I know not only myself, but several others who use Linux day to day, not only personally, but professionally as well. I use it for my own channel. And, the few times that I've challenged those folks, those naysayers on that, they were unable to prove their statement in any factual way. So just ignore those folks and do your own evaluation. Make your own decision. Make your own choices there by evaluating the products. Now, if you want to produce professional-looking documents, spreadsheets, presentations, what have you, you can even do photo and video editing on Linux. I use it for video editing. This entire channel is created, all the videos are created using free and open source software on Linux. So Linux is definitely up to the task. Who truly needs Microsoft Office at the end of the day? Well, surprisingly to some people, there are a far greater number of folks out there, including me, who do not need Microsoft Office than there are folks who do. All right, so here we are in LibreOffice. And I'm going to quickly navigate around this Office suite for you just to give you a feel for what all it can do, or some of the things it can do. So as I said earlier, it has a word processor, spreadsheet program, a presentation program, a drawing program, math formula creation program, and a database program. Let's go into the writer. Close this. So as you can see, the writer, as well as the other applications, take on the more legacy toolbar type Office look prior to the Office 365 ribbon. Now you can change this in LibreOffice. If we go to View, User Interface, if you like that ribbon or tabbed look, if you click Tab, now as you see here, it takes on more of that Office 365 ribbon look. Now if you want, you don't particularly care for this, you can always go back, go to View, User Interface, Standard Toolbar. So you've got some choices there. It's very flexible. There's a spell checker built in, thesaurus, quite a few features. It's very feature rich. You can create tables. You can even do some basic desktop publishing with this product. Next, we're going to go into, I'll close out of this, and we're going to go into Spreadsheet. Again, you can modify this toolbar look and feel to be more like the Office 365 ribbon, or you can stick with the more traditional legacy toolbar button approach as you see here. So this supports Microsoft Excel spreadsheets. It does a pretty good job with recognizing some of the more advanced formulas that Excel has. And the LibreOffice team does a great job at keeping this product updated. We'll close out of that. We'll go into the Impress program. And here's where you can select a template. So let's say we want to go with the blueprint plans. And as you can see, in fact, if we want to look at a slideshow here, start from first slide. So you've got various transitions that you can use for the slides. Let's see where we can find that. It's slide transition. So there are a whole number of slide transitions that you can use. You can adjust the speed of these. It's a very flexible product, and I've used it quite a bit. We won't save that. The drawing program, as the name implies, lets you create everything from flowcharts to basic diagrams. So here's a rectangle. You can create all types of different shapes and what have you with this. Math formula. I don't use this one very much, but I know that there are some really good instructions on the LibreOffice website on how you can embed formulas inside your documents, your presentations, what have you. So if you come here, and let's say you type 2, 4. Again, I'm not very familiar with the product, but it's very flexible. In fact, there's a really good help system available to you if you want to investigate how this works further. And of course, it has a database program. So you can create a new database. Let's do that now. We'll go ahead and create a very basic one. We'll use the table wizard. Give the database a name. I'll leave it as that. I think it's just ODF. Yep. So here's our table wizard. Let's say we'll stick with business. How about orders? So we'll choose everything, move that over, click Finish, and now we have a new orders table. If we double click on it, we can begin entering information into the database. So this is a relational database for those of you who are familiar with it. You can create forms with it, just as you can with Microsoft Access. And here's your forms designer. You can place text fields, list boxes, you can choose what's listed in there. Again, really flexible, very powerful. And you can also generate reports, of course, with it, and queries. So as I said, I'm not going to do a very deep dive into any of these Office products. I just want to show you what's available. And the LibreOffice product is completely free and open source. Now also, I've taken the liberty of installing two other Office suites that I really like. The next one is called FreeOffice. And first, let's go to the website here. So we'll go to FreeOffice. Here's the FreeOffice website. It's a very well laid out site, and they do a very good job at documenting their product as well. They also offer a paid version of this software called SoftMaker Office, which is very, very feature rich. So FreeOffice is really I would say a scaled down subset of the full-blown SoftMaker Office, but the FreeOffice is very feature rich. You know, for everyday Office document, spreadsheet, presentation type tasks, it's a great product. And SoftMaker also offers PDF editors, PDF viewers, things of that nature. And you can navigate through their site and find out more about the product. So let's open it up. We'll start with PlanMaker. This is their spreadsheet application. So we'll open that up here. And I just installed it, so there may be a bit of setup that's happening behind the scenes. Now, this is a really nice feature of FreeOffice. You can choose, and you can change this later on, how you want the user interface to look. So remember, in LibreOffice, we were able to toggle between the more traditional button type toolbars, like you see here at the bottom for FreeOffice, or you can go with the more ribbon-based format. So let's choose this one. We'll click OK. Skip this. I'll maximize this. So as you can see, it's laid out the toolbars, and this one looks really sharp. I mean, if you compared this to the latest version of Microsoft Office, it would look virtually identical. Granted, there are a few additional buttons or options for you here in FreeOffice when you compare it to Microsoft Office, but functionally, it is a superb program, and I use this one all the time. Now, again, you can change the user interface. So if we want to go to the more traditional, we'll restart it. As you can see, that's what happens here. Now you've got the more traditional buttons. So let's close out of that, and we'll go into, so that was PlanMaker. Now we'll look at presentations. So this is their PowerPoint equivalent. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, yes, there are a number of templates that you can choose from here as well for the presentation program. And finally, for FreeOffice, the word processing component, which is called TextMaker. We'll zoom in a bit there. And we'll change let's see here. Tools, leave options, is where we want to go. We want to change the appearance, the user interface. And we'll go with the tab view here. So they've got a few little ads on the side here. You can collapse these. Really, the ads are associated with their full-blown professional edition of SoftMaker Office. And if we look on their website, you can go to, I think it's softmaker.com. Let's see. That should be it. Yes. So read up on SoftMaker Office. If you want the more professional version, you can compare features between what FreeOffice offers versus SoftMaker Office. So we'll exit here. And finally, let's take a look at OnlyOffice. Now, OnlyOffice has a very interesting user interface. It uses a tabbed model, and I'll show you what I mean by that. You can also create a cloud account. So if you want to create yourself an OnlyOffice cloud account, you don't have to use the software. You can do that here and store your documents in the cloud, or you can use your existing cloud. So you may have an iCloud account, Google Drive account, or Microsoft OneDrive account. You can use that with these applications. So here's a document. We'll zoom in a bit. Again, it has that really nice tab look to it. But if we want to create, let's say, a spreadsheet now, we'll come in and I'll say, actually, let's do this. OnlyOffice, spreadsheet. Now notice, we'll let the spreadsheet open. Now notice these tabs here. The document is still here. I'm still here. And the spreadsheet is now here. I'm also still here. But they're tabs, so it's really easy to toggle back and forth between them. We can do the same thing for the presentation program. So this is their PowerPoint equivalent. So imagine working on a project that has some combination of these different document types, whether it's a or all three. You can now have all of these different files readily available to you, nicely tabbed in the OnlyOffice interface. This is something that I really like about this product. All of these do support reading and saving in Microsoft Office file formats. So if you were, let's say, sharing any of these documents or files with anyone else who may only have Microsoft Office, you can do that with these products. So we won't save any of this. And here's the OnlyOffice website. Now what's good about OnlyOffice, they also offer a commercial paid version as well. But if you go through their site as well as through the SoftMaker Office site, you'll come to find that these companies have a pretty good portfolio of software for you to choose from, especially if you have your own business. So if we go in, we're on the OnlyOffice site now, there's OnlyOffice Docs, OnlyOffice Groups, and this is an online collaboration platform for your team. So there's customer relationship management, you can manage projects, there's an email client for it, calendaring, quite a bit. You can learn quite a bit about these products just by going to their website. And if you notice something else pretty important, OnlyOffice works on Windows, Linux, macOS. You can get it for your Google Android phones and for the iPhone. So take a look at it, navigate into it, talk to the companies, reach out to them. You can call them directly, ask them questions about their products, and I'm pretty sure they'll be happy to answer whatever questions you have. So that's a look at the Office Suite capabilities in Linux. Now, for you folks who are coming from the Mac, I wanted to show you two Linux distributions that I like, in addition to Linux Mint, that may hopefully appeal a bit more to you Intel-based Mac users from a user interface standpoint. Now, don't get me wrong, for you Windows folks out there, I mean, Linux Mint is great, but take a look at, just bear with me here in the video, and take a look at these other two distributions that I'm going to show you. You may actually like the user interface for these two as well. So let's take a look at those right quick. Here we are in a Linux distribution called Pop!OS. Now, Pop!OS is created and maintained by a Linux computer manufacturer called System76. So let's take a look at the System76 website right quick. Now, in order to navigate around Pop!OS, notice you have this Activities menu item here. If we click this, look at what happens. You're presented with, in the Mac world, it's called a dock. And the dock has some default icons that are marked as favorites, and you can add and remove icons to and from this dock. You can also click here to show all of the applications that are installed. If we click this, now for you Windows users out there, this may bring back either fond or terrible memories of Windows 8. Hopefully not the terrible memories, but bear with me here. So in the Mac world, this is somewhat similar. I think it's your application launcher that's in the dock, where it brings up the icons of all the applications that you have installed on your system. Now, let me close this out. If you look here, we've already got the Firefox web browser, which is included by default with Pop!OS. But if we go into applications, we even have LibreOffice installed by default as well, just as we saw earlier with Linux Mint. So let's go to the Pop!OS System76 website. So we'll open up Firefox, and I'll type system76.com. And as I said earlier, System76 is actually a laptop and desktop manufacturer. They create some very powerful laptops and desktop computers that already come with Linux pre-installed. So if you're in the market to look for a new laptop or a new desktop, definitely take a look at System76. But more specifically, we want to go to the link here that says Pop!OS. So here's the Pop!OS website. There's really good documentation on it. You can download and install this on a USB flash drive as well and try it out before you actually install it on your machine. They've got, what I really like about Pop!OS is the user interface is nice and snappy. It's not an operating system or environment that's going to really overload your system. And it is, from what I've read online and what I've seen in videos, the thought is that Pop!OS is an excellent distribution if you're a Linux gamer, or if you're a gamer in general. Now, another thing about Pop!OS is, let's go back to the activities here. They have their own software center, much like Linux Mint does, but this is called the Pop Shop. We'll open that up. And the Pop Shop, as you can see, it's very well laid out, similar to Linux Mint's. They give you different categories of applications that you can install. And now, here we go. These are some Pop!OS picks. Now, this list changes as well over time. So these are some of the ones that are probably the ones that are most downloaded. So if some of you who are gamers may know about Steam. So Steam is available. Slack, Telegram, Meld, Visual Studio Code if you're a developer, the Signal desktop, Chromium web browser. I mean, there's so many applications, just like we saw at Linux Mint, available for you, and they're pretty much all free to download and use. And you can search for apps here as well in this search bar. So this is the Pop Shop. And installing an app in Pop! OS is just as easy as it is as we saw it with Linux Mint. So we'll close out of that here. You can also change your desktop background by right-clicking on the desktop. Pop! OS has a number of preloaded or pre-installed desktop backgrounds for you to choose from. You can, of course, add your own if you want to. That's by adding picture and put them in your pictures folder. So we'll just scroll through a few of these, let you take a look. That one looks pretty good. I like this one. I think this is the SpaceX Dragon capsule. So it's, you know, the desktop that we're looking at here, this environment is called GNOME or GNOME. It's pronounced either way in the Linux world, and there's a lot of debate over it. I just like to say GNOME. So this is the GNOME desktop. And another thing about the GNOME desktop, this is your file explorer, of course. It has a terminal, just as we saw with Linux Mint. Another thing about the GNOME desktop is that you have what are called extensions. Now, I won't go into a whole lot of detail on this, but extensions, it's a website here for GNOME where you can go and, let's say, I don't like using this activities menu here, so I want to use something called dash to panel. So we'll click on dash to panel, and watch what happens to the panel up here when I turn it on and install it. We'll close this. Now the panel's gone to the bottom. Granted, we can move it back up to the top, but now it has a more Windows-esque look to it, but you still have this GNOME application launcher, very similar to what you see on the Mac. The only difference is it's moved it to the bottom, and it's got way more customizable features than does the standard dock in GNOME. So Dash to Panel is a third-party extension that you load and install from the GNOME extensions website. You can change the style. You can make the icons smaller, make them bigger. You can move. Let's see here. Go back to the position. You can move to the top of the screen, the left side of the screen, or even the right side of your screen. So it's very flexible, at how you configure it and use it. Another thing about Pop! OS, it has this feature called Windows tiling. Now let me show you this. Currently, if you were to open up a window, like here we are in the browser, and we open up a separate window here, let's say the File Explorer. So this is how the windows will appear, one over the other. And you can click here to toggle between them. If we enable Windows tiling, look at what happens. And as we open more applications, Pop! OS begins to tile those windows for you. And you can toggle, back and forth between these as you see fit. So it's called the Pop! OS Windows tiling. And we could turn that off and put it back to normal. So I wanted to show you this. Again, Pop! OS runs on both PCs as well as Intel-based Macs. And I would encourage you guys to check it out, especially if you're a Mac user. It's not, exactly the same as the Mac, but it's a little bit closer to the Mac than I would say Linux Mint is. Now, we'll look at the next Linux distribution that I like, and one that may also appeal to both Mac and Windows users. And that one is called Elementary OS. So let's take a look at that one. Here we are in a Linux distribution called Elementary OS. And for you Mac owners, as you can see, the Elementary desktop look and feel should be very familiar to you. Here's the familiar dock at the bottom of the screen as you have in OS X and macOS. And Elementary uses a graphical user interface called Pantheon. We looked at Pop! OS earlier, and it uses, I mentioned, the graphical user interface called GNOME or GNOME. And Linux Mint uses what's called, at least the one that I showed you, uses what's called the Cinnamon desktop. So this is the Pantheon interface. Elementary OS runs on both Intel-based Macs as well as PCs. So let's take a look at the Elementary OS website right quick. But before we do that, I want you to know that Elementary OS ships with a browser called the Epiphany browser. Now Epiphany, as you see here, is a pretty plain browser. I mean, it does work. It works fine. I'm just not a fan of it. I'm more of a Firefox type of person. So what we're going to do before we go to the Elementary OS website, I want to walk you through how to install software using Elementary OS. All right, so if we look down here in the dock, we have something called the App Center. Let's click on that. Now, this App Center here may look a bit familiar to you because we just saw this same App Center in Pop! OS, and there's a reason for that. Pop! OS actually uses the Elementary OS App Center. So these two share this technology, essentially. Elementary OS created it, and Pop! OS has inherited it for their distribution. So let's go in and we're going to install Firefox here. In fact, I'm going to search for it. Firefox. We'll click on the free link. All this is saying that is telling you that, hey, Firefox is not one of the curated applications that Elementary OS has had an opportunity to review. But believe me, Firefox is a very well-known, highly utilized, as you saw both in Pop! OS and Linux Mint, highly utilized web browser. So these messages, as you install future applications, you can either leave it here and it'll pop up, or we can disable this message. So we'll install it. We'll put our password, see if I remember what it is. Click Authenticate. And it begins to download and install Firefox. So this should only take a moment. All right. So now that the install is done, we'll close out of this. And what we'll want to do is go to our Applications menu up here. So the Applications menu, and I do like this about Elementary OS, it gives you two different views. It gives you this more icon type view where you can scroll through the list of applications that are installed. And you can choose the one that you want. In this case, we'll click on Firefox, or you can go to what I call more of a traditional view where you have the categories on the left. We'll click through some of these. Notice that Elementary OS doesn't really ship with a Office suite by default like we saw LibreOffice with the others. But you can use the App Center to install LibreOffice if you choose. But what we'll do in a moment or two, rather than installing LibreOffice, I want to show you how to install, let's say, only Office. And there are a couple of steps that you'll have to take when you're using Elementary OS. One step you only need to do once before you can install third-party applications that aren't located within the Elementary OS App Center. So we'll go back to Internet, and by the way, if you want Firefox to appear in the dock, you simply drag it, drop it, and there it is in the dock. So let's say I want to remove Epiphany. We drag it off of the dock and release it, and poof, it's gone. But the application is still very much installed, as you can see here. So let's open up Firefox for the first time. And this is the default startup page for Firefox. You'll get two tabs. We will go to the Elementary OS website, and I think it's www.elementary.io, if I'm not mistaken. Kill that. Here we go. So we're on the Elementary OS website. using Firefox. And it's a very well laid out website. I mean, they do a great job at the theming. They give you a good bit of information on what the capabilities of elementary OS are. And I would encourage you to definitely explore it. But something in particular I want you to look at here. Notice there's an option here that says purchase elementary OS. So elementary gives you 4 options here. And before I go into this, recall earlier in this episode where I recommended that as you are using free and open source software, it would be a good idea for you to, if you choose to do so, to maybe donate a few dollars to these organizations who create this incredible software. It's completely optional to you. You don't have to do it, and you don't even have to pay for elementary OS. So notice they give you 4 options here. Pay what you want, $10, $20, $30, or custom. You can enter your own amount. If you put 0, notice the button now changes from Purchase Elementary OS to Download Elementary OS. That's all you have to do to download the operating system and install it. So I wanted to show you that. All right, we'll close out of Firefox. And now what I want to do is let me go into I want to talk to you a little bit about installing an Office suite, because I mentioned earlier that elementary OS doesn't include one, as you can see here. Now, if you go into the App Center, and I encourage you to use the App Center first to look for software, we click on Office. There are a number of applications that fit within this category, and I don't know all of these, but there's AbiWord. Where is it? It just went away. Sorry about that. Here we are. There's AbiWord that you can install. There's a document viewer, and I think LibreOffice is in here as well. In fact, rather than scrolling through the list, let's search. Here it is. So we can install any of these or all of these applications for LibreOffice just using the App Center. And installing software here is just as easy as it was in Linux Mint. And of course, since Pop! OS uses this same App Center, it's click on the icon, enter your password, and it'll install. However, what if there's software we want to install that's not in the App Center? So let's go to OnlyOffice. We're going to install that. I think it's onlyoffice.com. We'll go there. Yep. And we'll go to the OnlyOffice for desktop. We'll click Download. Then we'll scroll down. You'll pick the operating system that you're using, whether it's Windows 10, 8.1, 8 or 7, Windows XP or Vista. If you're running macOS, you can install it there. But since we're on Linux, I'm going to scroll down a little bit further. Now, Pop! OS, Linux Mint, and Elementary OS are based on a Linux distribution called Ubuntu, as you see here, Ubuntu. Ubuntu is also based on Debian. Now, the version of the version of Elementary OS that we're running is based on a version of Ubuntu 14.04 or higher. In fact, I think it's based on version 20.04 if I'm not mistaken, but it is higher than 14.04. So anytime you download and want to install software with an Ubuntu or Ubuntu-based distribution, you want to get what are called the DEB files. So we click here. We'll save it. Firefox will download the software. And we'll wait. It should be done in a moment here. So right now it's downloading OnlyOffice, the installer for it. So once it's done, we'll click the little folder icon. We'll close out of Firefox. And by the way, this is the Elementary OS file manager here. If we try to install this application, it won't install. because the App Center doesn't recognize it. However, now remember I talked to you briefly about an app called Terminal that was available in Linux Mint, Pop OS, even in Elementary OS. This is the Terminal. There is, and you only have to do this once, there is an install utility that you'll want to install here with Elementary OS. And I'll show you the command to do it. It's very simple. It says sudo, which stands for superuser do, apt install, and the name of that utility is called gdebi, gdebi. We'll press enter. We'll enter our Elementary OS password, if I remember it correctly. Now, what the installer is asking us, are you sure you want to do the install? Press Y for yes or N for no. So we'll put Y, we'll press enter, and we'll let the installer run. Now that it's done, we'll exit out of this, out of the terminal, and instead of double-clicking here to launch this, we'll right-click on it, choose Open With, and notice what's appeared in the menu now, the gdebi package installer. That's what we've just installed at the terminal. So we'll click on that. We'll wait a few moments. It's gathering information about the OnlyOffice installer, and it'll take it a moment to do that. But this is the only time that you'll have to install gdebi. Once it's installed, you don't have to install it again. So we'll choose Install Package. We'll put our password. Click Authenticate. And then the install process should begin. It may take it a moment because there are typically some files that it has to download and then begin working on doing the install for you. Here we go. So once the install is complete, and that's what it's doing now, we'll close out of this little dialog box here. So while that's happening, we can look at some of the other applications here. There's a calendar app, there's a music app, an app for playing videos, app for allowing you to view and edit photos that you may take with the camera. We'll take a look at system settings. This is the App Center icon. I have the Files Explorer open right now back here. And this is the gdebi package installer that's running. So now that it's done, we'll click Close. We'll close the gdebi package installer, and we'll close the File Manager. Now, if things are done correctly, we should be able to go back to the Office menu, and it should also appear here, OnlyOffice. And we'll click on the OnlyOffice icon, and here we are. Here's OnlyOffice that we looked at earlier. So now we have OnlyOffice up and running in Elementary OS. So we'll close out of that. And let's say I want to put OnlyOffice here on the dock. We'll go here. We'll drag its icon, place it where we want, drop it here. And now we have the OnlyOffice application icon right here on the dock. We click on it, and it'll launch for you. So that's really the only thing about Elementary OS that I think it's important for you to recognize. If you want to install an application that's not available in its App Center, you'll want to, the first time you do it, you'll want to run that terminal command that I just showed you to get the gdebi package installer installed on the system. And once you've installed gdebi for the first time, you won't have to repeat that process again. So from this point forward, if we want to install any other software from a vendor website, we don't have to install the gdebi installer again. We can simply download the DEB file, go to the Downloads folder, right-click on it, as we did with OnlyOffice, Let me show you again. Right here, we'll go to Files. We'll go to Downloads. You'll right-click on that application, and then you'll choose Open with GDebi Package Installer. That's it. That's all it takes. So I wanted to show you that. I think Elementary OS is a very good, it's extremely stable, as are the other two Linux distributions that I've shown you. It's a very stable operating system. As you can see, the user interface is very clean. It's really easy to navigate around. I'm more of a Firefox guy, but you can install Google Chrome, you can install the Chromium browser, you can install Firefox if you want, or you can use the Epiphany browser, which is included with it. There is an internet. You can just use the Epiphany browser, right? So I can browse whatever website, Yahoo's website. It does support tabs, you know, New York Times. You can go to Facebook if you want, Twitter, whatever. So as you can see, Epiphany works well. I'm just, again, more of a Firefox type of person. It does come with a default email client. It's pretty good, basic, but it gets the job done. The system settings, here's where you can customize some things. It shows you some of the default applications. So the web browser, we can change this from Epiphany, now that I've got Firefox installed, to Firefox. If you have multiple email clients, you can choose that here, which one would be the default one. Same thing for your video player, music, image viewer, text editor, your file browser. There are some basic desktop settings, so if you don't like this wallpaper, you can import your own, or you can choose a different one. That's a really nice one there. The overall appearance, you can make the text larger or smaller. Here's the dock. I have it upsized a bit to make it a little bit easier for you to view it. Language and region, you can choose, language support is not completely installed. You can complete the installation here. So there's a slew of other languages that are supported by it. And all of the other Linux distributions that I've shown you have this as well. Security and privacy, display settings, keyboard, mouse pad. If you're on a laptop, you can instruct it on what to do, when you're using battery power to save battery. There's Bluetooth, sharing. You can set date and time. There's some universal access here for persons with disabilities or what have you. So there's a lot of flexibility with Linux in general. And I think the elementary team they've done a really good job. I've only got a couple of critiques about it. One is the Epiphany browser, but as you can see, I solved it easily by installing Firefox. So no biggie there. So this is Elementary OS. I think you Mac users may take to this one a little better than you would Pop OS, but by all means, try out both. And the beauty of it is you can install any of these Linux distributions that I've shown you on a USB drive and try them out first to see which one you like before you actually install it onto your system and use it as your daily operating system. Okay, some final thoughts. As you can see, Linux is a very capable free and open source operating system. It's every bit as capable as Windows and macOS, so I do encourage you to try it out. And if you liked any of the content that you've seen in this episode, please do give it a thumbs up and definitely click that subscribe button, as it'll help the channel. I look forward to your comments and suggestions for other related topics that you may want me to cover. Just let me know. All right, see you next time. Bye-bye.